The wedding gown felt like a costume from someone else's life. And the moment Adaeze Chukwuma caught her reflection in the mirror, she almost tore it off her own body. The morning sun poured through the tall windows of the Okonkwo family estate, gilding the edges of the lace gown that her mother-in-law-to-be had chosen without ever asking her opinion. Adaeze stood there, hands rough from years of fixing motorcycle engines, nails short and unpolished, staring at a stranger wearing pearls and silk. She had grown up climbing palm trees in her father's compound in Nenugu, wrestling her cousins in the dust, and repairing generators for half the neighborhood by the time she was 16. She had never once dreamed of being anybody's bride, least of all the bride of Obinna Okonkwo, the quiet, wealthy heir everyone in Lagos whispered about with a mixture of admiration and pity, because marrying into that family, people said, meant disappearing into it. If you believe that love can find even the most unlikely heart, and that second chances are never wasted, take a moment right now to like this video, drop a comment, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to Whispering Tales Stories. Because this story is about to remind you why kindness always finds its way home. Adaeze had met Obinna 8 months earlier, not at some glamorous party, but at the side of a highway outside Ibadan, where his sleek black car had broken down in the rain. She had been the only mechanic willing to stop, covered in oil and mud, barking orders at him to hold the flashlight steady while she fixed his engine. He had laughed, genuinely laughed, for what he later admitted was the first time in years, and something about her fearless hands and her refusal to be impressed by his money had cracked open a part of him he thought had calcified long ago. Obinna's world was built on spreadsheets and inherited expectations. Adaeze's world was built on grease-stained overalls and the freedom of not caring what anyone thought of her. Somehow, against every rule of the world they came from, they had fallen in love. But love, Adaeze was quickly learning, was the easy part. The Okonkwo family was a different battlefield entirely. Obinna's mother, Nkechi, a woman whose composure seemed carved from marble, had made her disapproval clear from the very first dinner. She had looked at Adaeze's calloused hands during the meal and asked, with a smile so sharp it could cut glass, whether she intended to fix the palace generators herself after the wedding. The aunties tittered. The cousins exchanged glances. Adaeze had simply speared her jollof rice and said she certainly could, if it ever came to that, and the table had gone silent, in a way that told her she had won nothing and lost nothing, only confirmed what they already believed. She did not belong. In the weeks that followed, the pressure mounted like weight on a bridge never built to hold it. Nkechi hired an etiquette coach who despaired within 3 sessions. Adaeze was told to soften her voice, to walk with smaller steps, to stop laughing so loudly that it echoed down marble hallways meant for hushed elegance. She tried because she loved Obinna fiercely and did not want to embarrass him, but every attempt to shrink herself felt like sanding away the very thing that had made him fall for her in the first place. At night she would sit on the balcony of the guest wing, still in her borrowed silk pajamas, staring at the compound gates and wondering if she had made a terrible mistake, if the girl who once rebuilt a tractor engine with her bare hands during harvest season now belonged nowhere at all. Too rough for the mansion, too changed for home. The breaking point came 2 weeks before the wedding, during a garden party meant to introduce Adaeze to Lagos society. She had worn the elegant dress Nkechi selected, had practiced her posture in the mirror that morning, had rehearsed polite nothings to say to strangers in pearls, but when a small child, the son of one of the caterers, slipped near the pool and began to cry from a scraped knee that no one else seemed to notice, amid the champagne and chatter, Adaeze was the first one moving. She knelt in her expensive dress on the wet tile, cleaned the wound with the hem of her own skirt, and made the boy laugh by pretending his scraped knee was actually a battle wound from fighting off crocodiles. The guests stared. Nkechi's face turned the color of the tablecloths, and Adaeze, kneeling there with a stranger's child in her lap, silk ruined and dignity supposedly destroyed, felt more like herself than she had in months. That evening, Obinna found her sitting alone by the fountain, her makeup smudged from tears she refused to let anyone else witness. She told him plainly that she could not keep folding herself into someone unrecognizable, that she loved him but could not marry a version of herself invented to please his mother, that perhaps he deserved someone smoother, someone the world would applaud instead of tolerate. She expected him to argue for the wedding, to beg her to try harder. Instead, he sat beside her in his tailored suit, took her oil-scarred hand in his, and told her the truth he had been too afraid to say to his own family for years. That he had spent his whole life performing exactly the kind of quiet, polished perfection everyone demanded, and it had left him hollow. And the only real air he had breathed in a decade was the day. She yelled at him to hold a flashlight steady in the rain. He stood, still holding her hand, and walked her back into the garden where the party guests still lingered in stunned murmurs. In front of everyone, in front of his mother's icy stare, Obinna announced that the wedding would proceed exactly as planned, except the bride would wear whatever she wished, would speak however loudly her joy demanded, and would be introduced to every guest not as someone being remade, to fit their family, but as the woman who had already saved his life once and intended to keep doing it for the rest of theirs. Nkechi opened her mouth to protest, then caught the look in her son's eyes, a steadiness she had not seen in him since before his father's business had swallowed his boyhood whole, and for the first time she said nothing at all. The wedding, when it came, was unlike anything Lagos society had seen. Adiz walked down the aisle in a modified gown she herself had helped redesign, sleeves rolled just enough to move freely, a pair of simple sandals hidden beneath the lace because heels, she declared, were a losing battle she refused to fight on her own wedding day. Her father, beaming with pride from Enugu, walked her down the aisle, past guests who had once mocked her hands and now watched with something closer to awe. And when Nkechi rose during the reception to give a toast, her voice trembling slightly, she surprised everyone, perhaps herself most of all, by admitting that she had spent so long protecting her family's image that she had forgotten what it looked like when someone loved without armor. She welcomed Adiz not as an addition to be managed, but as the daughter who had taught her son how to breathe again. If this story softened something in your heart today, if you found yourself hoping for Adiz even for a moment, please take a second to comment below and let this story know it reached you, because every single comment helps. Whispering Tales. Stories find its way to someone else who needs a little hope tonight. And before we close this story, if the words second chances mean something to you, type them in the comments right now, because somewhere out there, someone needs to see that even the most unlikely love, the most unpolished heart, can still be chosen exactly as it is. Months later, when the Okonkwo estate generator sputtered and died during a dinner party, it was Adiz in her evening gown who rolled up her sleeves, without a second thought, and fixed it herself while the guests watched in delighted disbelief. Nkechi, standing in the doorway, simply smiled and said nothing had ever suited her daughter-in-law better, and Adiz, wiping grease from her hands onto a towel someone handed her, understood at last that she had never needed to disappear to be loved. She had only needed someone brave enough to see her exactly as she was, and choose her anyway.